Now, our last speaker, of course, is none other than the father of Julian Assange, John Shipton. He's going to deliver the concluding address, and John needs no introduction. But I have to say, John was a retired builder who became an activist in the quest to engage the public on his son's predicament and its significance, and to grow political support to save Julian's life. He turns 80 this year, and I mention that because he's on a punishing international schedule with no respite. He featured in the award-winning film Ithaka, The Fight to Free Julian Assange, produced by his son Gabriel Shipton. Please welcome John Shipton.
Boy, there's some tough competition up on this podium tonight. Marvellous speakers. Where to start? When you stare into the abyss stares back. This is a description of what has happened to the United States empire as it abandoned every rule and just relied upon the impulse of condign power. Do what we say. The laws are tools to institute what we want you to do. In staring back, the United States has become a monster, and the empire that accompanies it. And subsequently, the rest of us have abandoned the empire and think in other ways. This is important to remember. We have packed up and moved on. The institutions of state, in their momentum, are yet to follow us. Some of them do, but they will. Lubachevsky, the Polish thinker, proposed that an institution, once it becomes corrupt, is unreformable. It just must fade away and be replaced by new growth. I can give you an example. The Faroic institution lasted 15,000 years. It was destroyed in a riot in 350 AD when all of the last priests of the Faroic religion were murdered. Things stick with us, as Alistair illuminated really well. Camus, in his address to the United Nations, The Crisis of Civilization, said, Hegel's theory of history, man is made for history rather than history is made for man, is disgusting. A corollary, a natural corollary that we are made for history is market theory, where the markets are going to sort it out. This seems to me to be a misplaced belief in providence, a rather cargo cult approach to the organisations of human life and how we go about our relationships with each other and how the community in its avenues of opportunity provides a living space for families. Just to speak about something that concerns me, because I'm an Australian, is Australia. The sinews of creation of a community and a culture. We had Gough Whitlam moved into his premiership with a holistic view, and the view was, among other things, that you had to foster culture. That became the sinews, and those sinews would produce further culture, deepening and thickening within us. So you had the film school and the promotion of writers, Patrick White or Barry Humphries, Edna Everage nominated as Dame Edna. You have Wilfred Burchett. It's important, I'll rattle off a few names, emblematic. They're emblematic. They don't mean just the names themselves. They're emblems of what this culture can produce and has produced. Jessie Street, Herbert Vere Everett, which we heard in the first speaker, was in 1948 President of the United Nations, introduced the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a civilizational artifact without parallel. Hang on to it. The United Nations Charter, another civilizational artifact that governs the relationships between states in a series of laws. We hang on to it. It's a treasure. In Australia, we had Herbert Vere Everett, Gough Whitlam, Wilfred Burchett, who was the first journalist to go into Hiroshima and Nagasaki and bring to us an actual understanding of what this heinous crime, dropping an atom bomb onto a civil populace going about their daily work and daily lives, what it actually meant. Some people so destroyed merely left a shadow on a wall of their being. John Pilger. A dear friend, indefatigable in his defence of Julian, and the sweetest man in private conversation that you could ever hope to meet. Warm, broad of character, inviting, deeply intelligent, talented, virtuous and moral. He was a growth, like we all are here, of the soil of our culture. Whitlam understood, and John Menadue, by the way, is one of them, understood that the sinews of a culture must be fostered and created. Binoy Kampmark spoke to us today. Another fine creation of our culture. Michael West spoke to us today. Another fine. Treasure these people. Reverence them. Assange, another. Reverence them, because in so doing you strengthen ourselves, yourself. Reverence them. a word about AUKUS. $368 billion. The opponent that they propose for us, remember this, the opponent they propose for us, the Russian Federation, builds a Yasim-class nuclear submarine, slightly better than the Virginia class we're going to get. They build 8 for $9 billion. We build 8 for $368 billion. Who's going to win in this tussle? Not us. So if we take that little bit of knowledge and apply it, I mean, these insights aren't given to us. This discussion is not put before us. Why on earth do not these people understand the fundamental fact of life, that the genius of a people arises within the people, within us, within the loins of the men and women that constitute this society? In their vanity, they think that in the institutions of state, that they actually create the genius and it flows down. Well, it doesn't work like that. It flows upward from us. The education of our children and ourselves, culturally and technically, is a strategic asset to be cherished, as is the health of a nation. Its physical and mental well-being is a strategic asset. It fosters us. Don't they see that? It's plain to us. It's plain to us sitting here. So what is the balance? Let's say it's 15 billion, because things are a little more expensive in the United States and the UK. What is the balance of the money for? Is it a bribe? Is it tribute to the hegemon? These questions we must ask and address and formulate a view. They're really important. What is this money for? Because we know that 358 billion to buy 8 submarines because we have relative pricings is BS. Top to bottom, BS. Turtles all the way down. Next. The Virginia-class submarine is a platform for a weapon. They fire cruise missiles, 20 of them. They can have a nuclear warhead. Is it the scheme of the government to buy from the United States the capacity to build a deterrent, a short way to that sort of knowledge? It's a fair question. What's the money for? A bribe? A payment for knowledge? A tribute? Or a bit of each? Next, in nuclear war planning, there's a thing called a nuclear sump. They have them. They usually where they have what they call silos, where they put an ICBM in the silo and they put a dozen or so of these together, hard to destroy. It becomes a nuclear sump. Your enemy has to fire a lot of its missiles at that area, so it's a sump. Horrifying thought, really, isn't it? Why have a submarine base in Perth? It's a city of people. Becomes a sump, I suppose. B-52 base in Darwin. Another sump. Attract the enemy's missiles there. The more they use up in these sumps, the less there are for the United States strategic installations. Reasonable questions need to be addressed. Iraq. Shock and awe. The complete destruction of a nation, 26 of its 28. Water purification plants destroyed. All of its institutions of state ruined. Its army disbanded, its political parties destroyed, its education system gone. Well, but they preserved one department, and that was that concerned with the maps of where the oil is. This is a demonstration to any other nation that wants to be independent, because Iraq said we're going to trade in euros, not the oil dollar, not the petrodollar. We're going to trade in euros. Well, that was the end of them. Destroyed. Libya, Muammar Gaddafi was going to use his oil wealth to establish a gold dinar for Africa trade. Well, where are they today? They don't even have an organisation. They fight civil wars. They have markets where they sell people, slave markets, brought to you by none other than Hillary Clinton. That's what they do. You think in horror of Gaza, the Gazans. Ralph Nader estimates that 200,000 people have been injured in Gaza. The Foreign Minister of China finally put a phrase together to describe this. A shame and disgrace upon civilization. A shame and disgrace upon civilization. Our involvement, the Australian involvement, removing funds from UNRWA, from a nation starving under the false circumstances that 4 people that worked in UNRWA were members of Hamas. Well, I can tell you that every single employee of UMRA has to be submitted and approved by the Israeli government before they take up their position. That's Gaza next. Either we have been the benefit of, or together we have done it. We've either been the benefit of a change in circumstance, in social circumstance, and ideas that flow up within us mysteriously. We still contemplate the answers and look for cause and effect. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's our work over the last 10 years, all together of us, of making each other aware of the circumstances of one of the children of the Australian soil, Julian Assange, who attempted, or did construct a new means of bringing us information which, when we read it, turns into knowledge, and that knowledge becomes a cultural artefact with which we can alter policy. Maybe it's our efforts within each other to speak to each other, to have barbecues, dinners, meet with friends, have a beer or a Coca-Cola, whatever, coffee, and talk about things that has inculcated an understanding which has manifested itself in the Australian Parliament voting for Julian's return home. Really important. What does it mean? It means that the Parliament, as a precipitate of its vote, has said, we have sovereign independence. That is, we send a message to you that what you're doing to one of our children, our citizen, doesn't suit us. We no longer obey your dictate in that matter. Another one, it defends the capacity of us. This is what the precipitates of the Australian Parliament's decision. It defends and asserts the capacity of each of us to speak to each other within a body of knowledge which we get from our conversations and from the work of men like Menadieu or West or Julian or Pilger, within a body of knowledge encultured, becoming encultured, filling our, if you like the word, souls, or if you don't, if you like the word, the essence of our culture. Another one. It also says to the United States that the extraterritorial application of your laws to an Australian citizen doesn't suit us. Retract it. All of those things that, let's see, specks of gold becoming ingots, drawn from so much trash, so much ore rather, becoming encultured within us and rising up from within us into the Parliament. And in Parliament, they assert our desire and insist that the executive obey the will of the people and understand its culture, and that the institutions of state have fallen behind and have now existing, for example, I mean DFAT here, or ASIS. A note on ASIS and the secret services that their principal job is to prevent excessive leverage being put upon parliamentarians and and those who constitute the great institutions of state. That's their job. Not, as it's become, is to find ways to manipulate or cajole or advise firmly that a particular policy doesn't suit our great neighbour. Their job is to prevent that sort of thing and advise, not to institute. This, I insist, is a proper understanding. That's our success together. And I think that's pretty magnificent. And I just extend my gratitude and thanks to all of you and all of those over the last 10 years who've sustained us. I could mention just one last thing. Run out of time. That we've spent on lawyers and all of us working together, probably between $50 and $60 million. Probably 30 million on lawyers. Every single dime, cent, penny donated by people in support of Julian and in support of themselves in their hunger to see some decency in the world, in their desire to see some justice in the world, in their revulsion at the state of injustice held before the eyes. And thus we return to ourselves again and see ourselves as being part of the revolution that Alistair so eloquently illuminated for us. We are there. We are the vanguard. And so I offer my gratitude and congratulations. Thank you.
Lots of applause there for Julian Assange's father, John Shipton. I think to wrap up, I think what today has captured here is the shift that's occurring globally, and certainly the change of mood that's occurring in Australia. People used to ask, what can I do? They're no longer asking that, they're actually doing it. When you think that a group of lawyers, a group of suburban lawyers have referred the Australian Prime Minister to the International Criminal Court, this is, the first Western leader to be referred to the International Criminal Court. People in Australia have found a voice and they are doing something about the state of our democracy. I hope that you've been re-energised here today by the very inspiring talks we've heard in the very important work that you're doing in holding the media and the government, our politicians to account, and in the fight to save Julian's life and the fight, to paraphrase Donald Trump, to make democracy great. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and thank you very much for those joining us at home.